are the limiting beliefs that I say about myself, right? It's that people don't think that I'm smart. I'll never make enough money. I'm a bad person. I'm unlovable. I'm not enough. Like whatever these things are, it's literally taking the time to get those really subconscious stories consciously into our vision so that we can just understand like, oh, wow, look at all these things that I'm saying about the reality that I'm acting into. And there's a great quote that says like, we don't respond to reality as it is. We respond to reality as we are. And so if we have all of these unconscious stories about what people think of us and how the world works, then what happens is we become evidence collectors for these stories to be true.
All right. Welcome, Andrew, to the Connection Lab podcast. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is so fucking powerful for anyone that wants to connect in relationships. I know so many times where I've used this framework where someone does something and it bothers me and it sticks with me, and then the next thing they do is something completely unrelated. But because I have that filter of what they did last time, I start getting easily annoyed by them. And just by me following this framework, just immediately, every single time, that tension just releases, the other person is able to see me. And because I make the request so simple, people aren't arguing with it. They're like, oh, I didn't realize that you were feeling that. And yes, I can do this thing that you're asking me. And it just leads to such a deeper connection. So
yeah, I'll share a personal example, which is that like I was in a really amazing marriage for 11 years, and me and my ex-partner are now co-parenting our incredible 6-year-old son. We love each other very much, and we had a really fiery, very challenging relationship. But it didn't mean we didn't love each other a whole lot. And I'm happy that we've been able to salvage a really beautiful friendship. But also, she's incredibly fiery, incredibly confident and self-assured. And I think that my pattern for so much of my life was really revolving around codependency, was needing other people to be okay for me to feel okay, to be able to regulate my own emotional experience. And an amazing therapist who really helped me to identify this, that when I was withholding the articulation of my own hurt, of my own needs, because what I was trying to do was to salvage peace in the relationship, because I couldn't deal with the potential for rupture, the potential for conflict. And by me avoiding that, what I was doing was making her wrong for no fault of her own. Like she was who she was, but it was only when I was able to take ownership for no, if I'm not telling this person exactly what I want, then it is my responsibility and not theirs. And like what was really beautiful is that when I started to be able to articulate very clearly what my needs were, what started to illuminate was that actually how we wanted to show up in relationship was not what we wanted it to be. And then what that allowed us to do was to start to transition into a new form of relationship. Whereas now I hang out at her house all the time. She hangs out at mine. We're friends. We call each other just to chat. It's like we have a level of harmony in our relationship that we haven't had in years, but it's like we have to be able to risk the relationship that we have to create the relationship that we want. And like, that's where like so much of this courage comes in. It's that, but again, it's like life is short. And like, if you're willing to tolerate inauthenticity from yourself, like you will tolerate that in your relationship. And life is short. And so if you want to create like the relationships that are built on authenticity and trust, like this part of the framework is fundamental.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think, it all comes back to just sharing the truth, sharing your truth, because when you do share your truth, you attract the people and relationships that are right for you, that you want.
Yeah.
Beautiful. And on the flip side, so we talked, nonviolent communication, of how someone can skillfully talk to someone if they're feeling this type of resentment or anything. How about on the other side? So I'm actually doing a comfort zone challenge month. I have a group that's doing it right now. And this month, we're all focused on giving compliments and sharing gratitude for others. And some feedback some people gave is they want these compliments to lead to deeper connection. So how can somebody skillfully give compliments and express gratitude in a way that expresses themselves and is also going to open up a deeper connection?
Yeah, I mean, I've run a company for 9 years called Tribute, and we're Inc. 500 a couple of years ago. We've helped more than 6 million people to send these group video montages full of love
Wow.
and appreciation. And so in all the time that I've spent running this company and teaching interpersonal dynamics and communication, I would say that one of the easiest and most effective pathways to cultivating depth in our important relationships is simply sharing appreciation for the people we care most about. It's when we talk about some of the challenges of sharing our authenticity, like our appreciation is one of the easiest pieces of our authenticity to share. But oftentimes what happens is we also, especially in a work context, we judge our appreciation. That if I were to share my appreciation for my friends or my family members, it would be received poorly, or they wouldn't be available for it. They wouldn't reciprocate it. They think it was weird. In a work context, we oftentimes judge it and say that people are going to not work as hard if I tell them how much we appreciate them. And so we withhold it. But in both of those containers, there's a lot of studies that show like how grateful bosses progress more quickly than bosses who don't really show appreciation. People categorize appreciation and recognition as a strong quality of great leaders, and work environments that have strategic recognition programs are much more important and engaged than those without them. And then personally, it's that if you just think about what the experience of receiving someone's authentic gratitude would feel like. Someone told you specifically what they appreciate about you. Like, how would that feel? And almost across the board, like the answer is like, oh, it's pretty good. And so one thing that we can do to articulate our gratitude more effectively is to embrace this thing that I call I love you because. And it's based off this teaching by a guy named Robert Cialdini, who wrote a book called Influence. And what he said is that it's not our statement of affection that impacts the recipient. It's actually our explanation of it. Meaning it's not I love you, which is a beautiful sentiment, but it's actually the words I love you because. Because when you have to qualify, or you choose to qualify your love, you're showing the person the thoughtfulness behind the statement. You're showing them your why. And you look at someone like Simon Sinek, like why? Like people don't, care about what you do. They care about why you do it. And same thing. It's like people don't care about like what you say. They care about why you're saying it. And they feel that more when you're saying it's like, hey, Alex, I appreciate like your work ethic and how hard you're trying and how much you want to serve people and all the stuff you're creating in the world and all your ways you're pushing yourself. That means a lot more than saying like you're awesome. Right.
Yeah.
And so it's remembering that it's our qualifier, and that when we can share that appreciation, it's one of the easiest things that we can do to cultivate real intimacy in our relationships. One of the most effective to say. And like we can also be a pillar for meaningful appreciation in our communities, right? It's like when your friends are having birthday parties or anything, like raise a glass, like, hey, what's one thing you appreciate about this person? Make it easier for people to share their appreciation. It's like we all have so much of these kind feelings inside, and for some reason they get left in. And it's just, again, it's, I had the experience of losing my father in March of this year. And like one of the great joys that I have was that I was able to find like real completion in that relationship, and like knowing that everything that I have needed to share with him, everything I appreciated, he knew vividly. And like my mom, same way. My mom's older, and like it's just a living expressed. And like in my romantic partnership, it's like it's one of the most effective and easiest things we can do to cultivate intimacy. So it's like start there.
Yeah, it's so powerful. I mean, you get to express your own truth while helping the other person feel appreciated and connecting deeper. You have a saying that I've heard you say a lot that I love. I think it goes like, the old saying was, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say it at all. And what's the new saying? If you have anything nice to say it all. I love that. It's beautiful. Awesome. I think we're running a little. Do you need to hop off at in 7 minutes?
No, I got some time.
Okay. Awesome. And then, I don't think we touched on the last part of now, just going back to social flow. I mean, I think it's a little self-explanatory, but do you want to touch on that?
Yeah,
What does the now
totally.
mean?
It's can I be more present now? And it's just a reminder that oftentimes when we are feeling anxiousness, especially in a social context, it's because we're worried about the future, what people might say, how they'll respond. we're carrying stories of the past and who we are and limiting beliefs. But again, if I just come back into this moment, like you beautifully did before we started the podcast, just like connect with your breath. And in this moment, usually things are okay, right? And so what we do is when we come back into the present moment, we increase our capacity to respond to life instead of reacting to it. And so just by asking myself, can I be more present right now? What we do is we just are like, well, yeah, like I could do that by just taking a deep breath. And also to be more present, it's thinking about those internal motivators. It's like, how do I want to be right now? What do I want to know? What am I feeling? And so when we come back to the present moment, we increase our capacity to respond. And now within this framework, it's just cyclical because it's like, if I'm not present, then I come back in the present moment, take a breath, and I just cycle through those. And you can do that as many times as you want before any important transition in a social context. And you'll find that it just taps you back into this intrinsically motivated, authentic place of communicating and connecting with others.
So constantly just asking yourself, am I present? And yeah, it's very simple. Just come back, just feel your breath, maybe look around, come back to the here and now.
Yep, very much so.
Beautiful. Is there anything else you want to share about social flow or that framework on how people can use it?
Yeah, oftentimes when I teach and train people on social flow, I come back to this is a very strategic application for communicating with confidence, speaking clearly, connecting deeply, but that also really important frame that I use when I'm teaching is something called the identity model of change. That if you were to master this practice alone, it's going to very significantly increase your ability to show up the way that you'd like to with people. But also, the identity model of change posits that it is not strategies or tactics that improve our ability to, they're not transform our ability to change our behavior. It's our identity. That fundamentally what drives our behavior more than anything else is our identity. Identity is who we think we are. And so if we have these strategies like social flow and that's going to be really helpful and valuable. But if you don't address the underlying beliefs that you have about who you are, how people perceive you negatively, and like how they're going to respond to you, then what's going to happen is your behavior will reflect those beliefs. If you have the belief that I can't be fully honest with people or they'll leave me, I don't care if you have the social flow framework. You have that foundational belief about who you are and how the world works, and that's going to dictate your behavior. And so the strategies and the tactics are helpful and practical, and we can use them. The deeper and most transformative work is being courageous enough to look at your stories, to be honest about what's there, how they're impacting you, and then to start to look at some of the things on the other side, your empowering beliefs. And like oftentimes what I'll do with clients and people in workshops is I'll have them ask the question, what do your friends love most about you? What do your colleagues respect about you? And writing those down, because it's like what my colleagues love about me. My colleagues love that I'm inspiring. My colleagues love that I'm an incredible communicator. Like those are again stories, right? Like these are just stories, but they're on the other side of the spectrum. But I can start to clearly articulate what my empowering beliefs are and not just limiting beliefs, which our mind will not automatically construct for us because our mind wants to think about the worst case scenarios so that we can avoid that happening rather than envisioning, oh man, I'm going to give this talk and 1,000 people are for sure going to be giving me a standing ovation because it's the best talk they've ever seen. It's like our mind doesn't naturally go to that place, but it can when you start to respond to life instead of reacting.
So this is a key part with when you have that awareness of those negative stories, now you can start to replace them with these positive stories. And you mentioned a bit about the process. You said maybe think about what your friends say about you, what other people say about you. Is there anything else people can do to find those stories? And is there a process to really ingrain those stories, instead of doing it as a kind of like a one-time thing?
Yeah, I would say that there's a couple of things you can do in addition to that, which I think that those prompts, again, just from simply journaling are really powerful. Another one is to do an exercise. My mentor, this woman, Lauren Zander, did it, and I love it. And I oftentimes will prescribe it to people. But it's called, do you know who the fuck I am? And the exercise is taking a moment to simply look back at your life and acknowledging yourself for all the things that you have already done. Like, what are the challenges that you've overcome? What are the things that you've done you never thought you could do? Right? It's like there's a great quote that says, like, 5 years ago, you would have been incredibly grateful for the problems that you have today. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like we very quickly, we normalize our situation. And so by looking back over time and what are the challenges I've overcome? What are the things that I've accomplished? What are the relationships that I've built? Like, all the things you've done, you remind yourself who you are and what you've already done. And without conscious thought, we oftentimes forget those things. But once we look back, it makes it a lot easier to look forward through the lens of possibility.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, being very conscious about those new beliefs and new stories. And is there a daily practice someone can do to really, really condition those new stories into them?
Well, I think that what I would put here is that when you are more aware of the empowering stories, consciously gaining evidence for them, and this is why it's like looking at these empowering stories, like the really, really deep ones are like most powerful. Like one that I've personally adopted is that's just helpful with anyone I meet is that anyone whose life I'm in is better off because of it. Like, I don't know anybody in my life who's like their life is not better off for me being in it. And so I'm like, well, if anyone wants to get to know me, your life will probably be better off because everyone I know who has me in their life is better off because of it, in whatever way. And so it's like, what is that engineering me? A level of comfort, that I'm worthy of people's time, no matter who they are. And so once you have some of these foundational beliefs, it's just like consciously collecting evidence for them of like, oh, collecting evidence and like putting it in that as like collected evidence for that story. So I'd say that it's just collecting evidence for the empowering beliefs and not for the disempowering beliefs.
Mm-hmm. Because just being intentional about finding these new beliefs and looking, like, you have to take conscious effort to do this, like, because like you said, your mind won't naturally do it. So you have to go search for this evidence. Beautiful. One thing we touched on a few times that I want to clarify is the topic of vulnerability. A lot of times I think vulnerability is misunderstood, but we both know it's so powerful in relationships to be vulnerable. It's a core part of it. So what is vulnerability and why is it important in connecting with someone?
Yeah, so I think that I oftentimes stay away from the word vulnerability. I oftentimes use the word transparency. But ultimately, I think of vulnerability as the willingness for the raw, real, unedited version of ourself to be witnessed. And it's the willingness to be rejected. It's the willingness to be disliked. It's the openness to things not going the way that you want. Like, to me, that is vulnerability. It's like without the courage that something could go wrong, like, there really isn't vulnerability. And so it's part of, like, there's a risk, right, that we could perceive, like someone could not receive it, someone could respond negatively, they could reject us. But also, like, it's in the pursuit of truth, of real connection, of intimacy, of helping other people to do it. And oftentimes the frame that I will put on top of all of this is that what is so powerful about, I'll just use the word like authenticity again. And like authenticity, when it's like, if I'm telling someone like, I love you and I think you're amazing, that's authentic, but perhaps it's not vulnerable, right? Because there's not a lot of risk involved with telling someone that. But if I'm telling someone, hey, like, I want to have a conversation with you, I've been out of integrity, like, I haven't been doing this thing that I said I've been doing, right? It's that's vulnerable because they may respond negatively. But also, what I will say here is that everyone is holding on to so much. Like, everyone is holding on to so much, things that they're feeling and not sharing, like places where they've been out of integrity, like just things that they think other people won't be able to hold for them. And when we are courageous enough to be vulnerable, share the challenging aspects of our authenticity, what oftentimes happens is we at the same moment create space for other people to share what they're holding on to. And so the frame that I offer here is that our authenticity, our vulnerability is an implicit act of service, because it creates space where other people can also be vulnerable. Where what we do, it's that this is what I talk about of like, is this for me or is it for you? And oftentimes what I will say to people is I have people start conversations with something I call conversational purpose, which is what type of relationship, why you're sharing this, what type of relationship you hope to create. And in so many of those, what I say, it's like, I value you, you lead with appreciation. And they'll say like, I want to have a relationship where both of us can be fully honest and fully understood. Right. And it's like, and to do that, like I need to come clean it. Like I've been holding on to something. And at the end of that, you say, it's like part of why I'm sharing this is because I also don't want you to feel like you have to hold on to anything. So if there's anything that I could hear you on, I hope you'll let me know. And if you look at anyone that you care about, any meaningful relationship, whether it's a coworker, a friend, a family member, and you look that person in the eyes, or you just think about them in your mind's eye right now while we're listening, and you say, do I want this person to feel like they can be themselves with me? Do I want this person to feel like they can be honest, like they can be truthful? And in my opinion, the only way that you can truly and ethically create that space is to do it yourself. Because if you're not willing to risk it, why should they think it's safe to risk it? And so that really is what vulnerability is. And it's why I view it as this intrinsic and beautiful act of service. And what's so helpful about that is that a lot of times people are better at doing things for other people than they are at doing things for themselves. And so if they only look at their vulnerability as something that is meaningful for them, their own growth, their own relief, you name it, it's harder to do that thing. But once they understand, like, no, I want to have a relationship that's based on honesty. I want this person to feel like they can be heard and fully expressed. It becomes easier, and we find a deeper well of motivation and courage to take action when it's challenging.
Yeah, so beautifully said. And I think for a lot of people maybe struggling with social anxiety, you mentioned at the beginning that social anxiety is a human experience. Everyone is experiencing it. So the other person you're talking to may have things that they're scared to share, and you really, from your eyes, you would have no idea. But when you start sharing your own truth, even things that some people might judge or edgy stuff, you're making the other person feel comfortable that they can also meet you there and also share that. Yeah, it's beautiful.
Thanks, Ben.
A few other questions I wanted to touch on. Are you still okay with time?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I mean, maybe we could do a kind of like a part 2 for thinking about how to, like, if you have no friends, how do you meaningfully find your tribe, like that entire process?
Yeah, totally. I've got a whole bunch there, and I'm happy to be your first repeat guest as well.
Beautiful. So we'll leave that for, yeah, because I think there's so much we can go into on that. So we can kind of leave that for a part 2.
Cool.
One quick question I wanted to ask you, we recently talked about comparison. I remember, I think it was a few months ago. Yeah, what are your thoughts on comparison? When you're, if you're someone who is having these thoughts, you go into a room and maybe, a thought I used to always have was that I'll really gauge on how confident everyone is. And I'm in my head kind of comparing myself on how confident this other person is in relation to me. And obviously it has all these negative effects. But what would you tell to someone who finds himself comparing?
Yeah, it's comparison is the thief of joy. And I don't want to butcher whoever said that, but it's so true. And like what I find is I have internalized my own comparison to others as an expression of my own insecurity, so that I interpret it as such. So whenever I find myself comparing to other people, I'm like, oh, like what insecurity is this bringing up in you? And one of the quickest ways that I have found to integrate and transmute competition is with celebration, which is if I can celebrate everyone's success, like that says so much more about my character. Because if comparing myself to other people is really just like my own insecurity, then celebration is a sign of my security, which is like, I don't need to compare myself, judge myself against other people. I can celebrate everybody because like I'm confident in myself. And you can just choose. It's a decision. It's like if I'm comparing myself to someone and I can be like, no, I don't want to do that. I can choose to celebrate the one. I can be like, fuck yeah, like way to go. Like I'm so happy that you did this. Building a big business is hard. Being super confident or fit is hard. And when you just make a decision to celebrate, oftentimes what you find is the comparison will go away. And we just acknowledge like how pointless it is to compare versus celebrate and be inspired by other people. So that's like a helpful little kind of reframe.
Yeah, to celebrate. And something that author Brene Brown says is that she's seen that you can't control the first thought of comparison because it's ingrained in us from evolution, but you can choose the thought after that. And what you're saying is you can choose to, instead of being jealous, you can just choose to celebrate them and admire them, which is just going to lead to all this more positive energy.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
I love that.
I'm curious, is there anything you often find yourself still comparing yourself, and how do you deal with it?
Yeah, I mean, so I've just come out of leading a business for 9 years. I'm starting a new one now. And so I think that I consistently find myself in a community of people who have built very large companies, both from an impact and financial perspective. And so I think that again, it's natural for me to you just said framing that like I really am able to.
Andrew, sorry, 1 second. You're getting a little choppy. It might be my internet. Andrew, one second. Can you hear me? Shoot. 1 second.
Other people, that's honestly a big part of. I agree perfectly with it.
Andrew, 1 second. Yeah, it cut off for a second. Let me just switch to my internet. Just give it 30 seconds.
That'd be like a clean break.
Okay. Sorry about that. You there? Hey, are you there?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay. Yeah, sorry about that.
Can you hear?
Yep.
Can you hear me?
Yep. So I just had to switch internet. Let me just take a sip of water. Yeah, the part that got cut off, the last part, you said you were sharing your story about being surrounded by business people and comparing yourself.
Okay, so yeah, I think when it comes to being around like successful people and comparing myself, it's again, I've built a community of people who've had a really outsized impact in the world from an impact and a financial perspective. And so I think it's natural for me to look at my own desire to cultivate similar impact and financial success in the world. But like you just said, I don't control the first thought, I control the second. And I'm so clear about that sort of celebration being intrinsic to how I want to be in the world, that opportunity to be inspired by people. And if I look at a lot of my very close friends who are very successful people, I think a degree of our closeness is directly due to that, because they know I'm not jealous of what people have and not be jealous, right? I can still celebrate that. And so it's like I can choose to be inspired by what these people have created, to choose it as possibility of like, look at people who've actually made hundreds of millions of dollars and impacted 1 billion people, and be like, that's cool. Like, let's go. That's inspiring. And, I work with a lot of really powerful people and executives and CEOs. And I can't tell you like how often I talk to people who feel a sense of loneliness, because as they start to achieve certain degrees of success, they find that it alienates them from people in their lives who are not celebratory of it, right? Who do get jealous, who aren't in the same positions. And so I think that a great equalizer, if you are hanging out in rooms of people who you perceive to be more successful, is to choose to be inspired by it and to be appreciative of it without fanboying, but to be inspired and to appreciate and to, again, like, choose your second thought very wisely. I love that frame.
Okay, just have a few more questions we can kind of do on a speed round. Just 3 questions. First one is, what are your favorite books that you'd recommend for someone wanting to be more confident and more authentic?
I would recommend, just because you and I have been talking about it, I'll recommend The Surrender Experiment first and foremost. A beautiful book about really just tapping into the flow of life and releasing our need to control kind of what is happening, but just allowing ourselves to really kind of welcome and appreciate what is. So I'd say that is a really big one for confidence and connection. I would say not even a book, but reading Byron Katie's The Work on her website is a really short one. You can get through that in 30 minutes. That would be a really powerful one. I would say not even reading Nonviolent Communication by Marshall Goldsmith. I'd go to my Medium page and read my 15-minute introduction, and I think you'll get the basics of it. But Nonviolent Communication is a really powerful one, specifically for communication and human connection. Those are the ones I'm a big fan of. A book that is very esoteric but has been the most powerful for me and my own approach to life and relationship. And it's a book called Gestalt Awareness Practice in the Lineage of Dick Price. And it's a beautiful story about the founding of Esalen and how this modality really helped them to facilitate meaningful conversation and self-exploration. And so those would be like the 3 that come top of mind for me.
Beautiful. Next question. What are some daily habits or practices that you do that help you to maintain your self-esteem and to, take more confident actions?
First and foremost, the easiest one, and what I would say is probably one of the most impactful, is just a daily and nightly gratitude practice. I wake up in the morning and I say 3 things I'm grateful for and 3 things I'm looking forward to. It takes me 1 minute. It takes like so little energy.
Yeah.
But that simple thing, there's studies that show that I think that to have a 5% increase in subjective well-being, you need to like double your salary to have that impact. And there were a study done of people who were filling out a gratitude journal, and they found that people who filled out a gratitude journal for twice a day for a month had a 5% subjective increase in their emotional well-being, which is like academically how you say happy. And so what's easier, doubling your income or taking 10 minutes a day to be grateful? Answer is pretty obvious there. So that would be one that's there. And then usually when I feel best about myself, it really is a matter of, Stephen Covey says, don't schedule or don't prioritize your schedule your priorities. And like I'm a list keeper, and I just know that when I wake up every single day and I look at my list of things to do, if I look at what's most important and I choose to do that thing first, I'm going to have a good day. Like, it really is that simple of just, if I make a decision to look at what's most important and do that thing first, like that is across the board. Like, people's ability to focus on what's most important, I think, is what differentiates some of the most effective leaders. And then third and foremost, it's just not having the phone within arm's distance. It's like allowing myself to not be distracted. Again, like, focus is what differentiates some of the best leaders on the planet. And so just don't have your phone within arm's distance, because it's the easiest way to get yourself out of flow, to distract when it's challenging. But your ability to really embrace that and stay focused is where I think we unlock a lot of our ability to create meaningful work.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, our attention is our most powerful asset. Beautiful. And finally, what are some questions that you love to ask someone when you first are meeting them that allow you to connect deeply with them?
Yeah, so I have a process that I do this a lot at my social flow workshops, where I'll help an audience at an offsite or a conference to articulate their big 5. And so your big 5 are, if you just think about generally, when you meet people, what do you most want to know about them? If you thought that people would be open and available to answer you, like, what are your big 5 questions that you really want to know about people? And so for me, mine have evolved over time, but pretty much the same. And so it's, what's your dream? If you couldn't fail, what would you be doing with your life? Second is what's most exciting right now. Third is what's challenging right now. So I give people an opportunity of like, usually what I'll say is like with people that I'm more casual with, I'll say, what's good, what sucks? And it's a way for people to meet me where they're at. Because
like
again,
that.
it's like,
What's good,
if
what sucks.
yeah, if someone's thriving and they want to say like, oh, we just raised $10 million round, great. Someone's breaking up with their boyfriend, they can go there, right? All of it's accessible because I just want to know where people are at, what's real. That's where I'm going to connect to people. The next one is like, what are you reading right now, or what's the last thing that you learned? So that's a really important one. And then one of the last ones is just, what do you care about? And I find that one is like, again, like a little like off the cuff. I don't think a lot of people ask it, but it really invites in like kind of a pause of like where people are at. And I feel like it really helps me to get to know people. And then if I know what you care about, like there's a whole world of possibility that opens up within that.
And for the last one, how do you just ask people straight out? Like, what do you care about? Or how do you
Yeah,
position
because
that?
what I've learned about this like so much is, again, it's that like people understand dissonance. Like when we are feeling uncomfortable in our bodies, like we make other people feel uncomfortable. Like they can feel the dissonance. It's like you think about the feeling of like you're standing somewhere and you know someone is looking at you. Like you could feel the hairs in the back of your neck like going up. It's like we can feel dissonance or like energy like that. We'll look over. And so what I know about asking questions is that like I want to ask these. And so whether you're available for that, you'll tell me. But when I can ask a question like that and my energy is grounded into the reality that this is true and what I want to know, people feel it. Like I have people who like look at me and they're like, what do you mean? I'm just like, what do you really care about? And it's like what I want to know. And if my energy is sincere and genuine, like there's something special that happens in that. And so I think that that's what's, so beautiful about that. I remember I talked to a guy who's a really successful entrepreneur from Sweden. And like I asked him the question, I remember his eyes were just like, are you serious? And I was like, yeah. And he was like, I don't think I would usually answer this question, but I can tell you really want the answer. And I was like, I do. And we had a beautiful conversation, about him traveling to the Middle East and like fighting in a rebellion with like soldiers and like caring about like peace. And like it was really beautiful.
Awesome. I think a lot of people that are struggling with social anxiety, they often say, I don't know what to talk about, but really they do. They do. I mean, or they can at least think about what do they really want to know? What are they curious about? And that's their answer.
You don't need to know what to talk about. You just need to know what you want to know.
Yeah, exactly. There's no other trick, or you don't need to, have different topics or anything. It's truly coming back to your authentic curiosity.
Yeah, I often say it's like, again, there's no right, just real.
Beautiful. Any final messages you would want to say to our audience?
I would just remind people again who are watching this, who are coming from a place of feeling socially anxious at times, or any sort of dissonance in conversation or trying to connect with people, just to normalize that as this is a natural and healthy response to interacting. And the more that we're able to accept that response and acknowledge it as real and valid and being there for a reason because it's trying to help us to do something, the more we can choose our response to it. And so it's just like, but it starts by acknowledging, like, this is what I'm feeling. And rather than shutting it down, rather than judging it and me for it, I'm just going to acknowledge it. That makes sense. And now I get to choose that second thought, which is, how do I respond to it? Maybe I'm going to come out of my external and come into my internal, and social flow through this thing and focus on the questions I want to ask. But it's just that. It's like making that second thought a conscious one.
Yeah. So don't suppress it. Don't put shame around it. Just be aware and accept it.
Totally.
Beautiful. And people want to learn more about you or potentially work with you, where can people find you?
So most of my stuff is available on my website. It's itsandrewhorn.com. So it's Andrew Horn. I do a lot of writing on Medium and on Instagram, and you can check me there at It's Andrew Horn as well. And you can see all of my other companies and everything that I'm involved with there as well.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, brother. I'm so grateful to have you on. So grateful to have you as my coach and mentor for the past few years. You've completely changed my life. And yeah, thank you so much for hopping on.
Well, I feel your heart, and it's like as a teacher and like as a mentor, like the process of watching a young person transform and come into their own, and like seeing you step into your own purpose and your own passion and your own approach to it, it's it's a beautiful thing to watch, man. So I'm grateful to be on the journey, and have a strong hunch that things will just keep getting better and better for you. So a lot of love.
Thank you, brother. Boom. How do you feel?
Feel great, man. You did a great job. You're really dialed, like practical, like kept me honest, asked great questions. Like really like on communication is probably one of the better interviews I've done.
Awesome. Fuck, man. Thank you for sharing that, because I definitely had some doubts in my head.
No, yeah, I thought you did great. Like you were really like you asked great follow-up questions that I thought took us deeper. So it was really good.
Yeah, brother. Excited to get this one launched. And yeah, definitely want to do a part 2 soon.
Beautiful, man. All right, brother. Well, I'm going to go out to dinner with my lady, so I'll pop off now. But I love you. I'm proud of you. And just
Thank you,
love seeing
brother.
you doing this work in the world, man. Great job. Truly.
Thank you, brother. Sending you so much love.
All right. I'll talk to you soon.
Ciao.
Peace.
Thank you guys so much for sticking with us till the end of this episode. If you liked the episode, please leave a review on whatever platform you're listening to. It makes a huge help for us. So please do that. We have some amazing people already lined up for the next several podcasts. So you definitely want to stay tuned for that. And yeah, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode.